Robert Muldoon is probably the most notorious leader the country has ever had. He was offensive and divisive, he was vicious and determined, he was power-hungry and principled. He was charismatic in a very crude kind of way. He was a very complex man. Was Muldoon a left-wing or a right-wing Prime Minister? This is an interesting question. In some regards he was right-wing. He continually criticised socialists. He was anti-abortion. He repeatedly demonised immigrants and introduced anti-immigrant policies. He was of course the leader of a right-wing political party. He admired right-wing politicians like Thatcher and Reagan overseas. But he did also have a left-wing side. He was an opponent of the death penalty. He believed in the big government welfare state approach introduced by the first Labour government. He constantly interfered in the economy in pursuit of desirable social outcomes. He was a far cry from the free market fanatics that have taken control of the modern right. Muldoon was an aggressive opponent of neoliberal economics. He also opposed the abolition of the Maori seats and even suggested giving Maori greater control over the justice system. He claimed that prisons were a Western institution unfit to address the needs of many Maori offenders. He asserted that Maori should have greater control over legal penalties. You could quite easily argue that Muldoon was the most left-wing National Party leader in the nation's history. Of course, for a person like Muldoon, ideological labels can be counterproductive. He was first and foremost a pragmatic politician who cared about the country. He was not a highly ideological man, at least not consciously so. His policies were often crude, especially his disastrous economic management. Ultimately, his failures created the perfect justification for the neoliberal policies that he despised. That is the sad irony of his leadership, and the most significant component of his legacy. Still, I caution against portraying Muldoon as a very right-wing politician. He most certainly was not. And I would not compare him to Luxon either. Many people have been comparing Muldoon to Luxon. But these prime ministers are very, very different. Muldoon genuinely cared about the country. Luxon does not seem to care at all. Muldoon was deeply interested in governing. Luxon seems to have no interest in governing. Muldoon adopted a massive workload as finance minister and prime minister. Luxon wants the prestige of the top position, not the work of a ministerial portfolio. Muldoon was a very strong leader who had almost total control of the government. Luxon is a weak leader, constantly undermined by his coalition partners. Muldoon hated neoliberalism. Luxon happily goes along with it. Muldoon would never have formed a coalition with the ACT party. He aggressively hated everything that ACT represents. Muldoon was a great debater, a crude yet charismatic leader. Luxon, on the other hand, comes off as insincere and unlikable. Luxon is a joke compared to Muldoon. In Muldoon's day, Luxon would be lucky to be a backbencher. The quality of our leaders has declined considerably.